The freezing rain pelted Willow Chadwick's face as she staggered through the muddy streets of Whispering Pines, Colorado, one hand clutching her swollen belly, the other gripping a worn leather satchel containing everything she owned in the world. At 22, she never imagined she'd be cast out by her own family, but the letter from her father had been clear. She was no longer welcome in the Carson family home. Not since they'd discovered her condition pregnant, unwed, and carrying the child of a man who'd promised to return but never had. It was April of 1874, and the spring storm had turned the usually dusty Main Street into a treacherous bog that pulled at her boots with every desperate step. The town's buildings loomed like shadowy judges in the fading twilight, windows glowing with the warmth she'd been denied. Willow's tears mingled with the rain as she remembered her mother's silent face turned away, her father's thunderous voice. "No daughter of mine will bring such shame upon this family," her vision blurred as she stumbled on a hidden rut, nearly falling face first into the mud. The baby kicked inside her, as if protesting their shared predicament. 6 months along now, there was no hiding her condition beneath layers of clothing. "Whoa there, miss." A strong hand caught her elbow, steadying her before she could fall. "You shouldn't be out in this weather." Willow looked up through rain-soaked lashes to see a tall man in a duster, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. The stranger's grip was firm yet gentle, his voice deep with concern. I have nowhere to go," she admitted, her voice barely audible above the storm. The man tilted his head, studying her face before his gaze dropped briefly to her protruding belly. Instead of the judgment she'd grown accustomed to, his eyes showed only kindness. "Name's Samuel Cooper," he said, keeping his steadying grip on her arm. "Got a place just outside of town. It's not much, but it's dry and warm." Willow hesitated. She'd learned the hard way about trusting men with charming smiles and easy promises. As if sensing her thoughts, Samuel stepped back slightly. "Just offering shelter from the storm, miss. My mother would haunt me till my dying day if I left a woman in your condition out in this weather." A particularly violent gust of wind nearly knocked Willow off her feet, making the decision for her. "Willow," she said, teeth chattering. "Willow Chadwick." Samuel nodded once, then removed his duster and placed it around her shoulders despite her protests. The warm leather enveloped her like an embrace, smelling of tobacco and horses. "My wagon's just down the street," he said, pointing to where a covered wagon waited, hitched to 2 patient horses. "Can you make it that far?" Willow nodded, clutching the coat tightly around her shoulders as they made their way through the downpour. Samuel kept a respectful distance while remaining close enough to catch her if she stumbled again. The wagon provided blessed relief from the rain, though water dripped through small tears in the canvas. Samuel climbed up front while Willow huddled in the back among sacks of grain and supplies. "Ranch is about 3 miles out," he explained over his shoulder as he flicked the reins. "Not much to look at, but it's home." Willow said nothing, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. What did she know about this man? Yet the alternative, wandering through town until exhaustion claimed her, seemed far worse. The journey passed in tense silence, broken only by the rhythmic splash of hooves and the creak of wagon wheels. When they finally arrived at a modest homestead nestled against a stand of pines, Willow felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension. "Wait here," Samuel instructed as he jumped down from the wagon. He disappeared into the cabin and emerged moments later with a lantern. "Come on, let's get you inside before you catch your death." The cabin was small but tidy. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, embers still glowing faintly. Samuel busied himself coaxing the fire back to life while Willow stood dripping on the rough wooden floor. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a rocking chair near the hearth. "I'll make some coffee." Willow obeyed, too exhausted to argue. The gentle rocking motion soothed her aching back as warmth from the growing fire began to chase away the chill. "Why are you helping me?" she finally asked as Samuel handed her a steaming mug. He shrugged, settling into a chair opposite her. "Like I said, my ma raised me better than to leave a person in need. Most people see a woman in my condition and assume the worst." Samuel's expression remained neutral. "Not my place to judge. Besides, I made a promise once." "A promise?" His eyes took on a faraway look. "To my brother before he died. We were fighting at Gettysburg. He had a sweetheart back home expecting his child. Made me promise I'd look after them if anything happened to him." He stared into his coffee. "Never got the chance. She died before I made it home, both her and the baby." Willow felt a pang of sympathy. "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago, 10 years this July." He cleared his throat. "Point is, I know how cruel the world can be to women on their own, especially." He gestured vaguely toward her belly. "My family disowned me today," Willow said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "My father found the letters from—" She faltered, unable to say his name. "The baby's father. He was a surveyor for the railroad. Said he'd come back for me, but he didn't," Samuel finished for her. Willow nodded, tears threatening again. "Father said I'd brought disgrace on the family name. Gave me an hour to pack my things and leave." Samuel's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice gentle. "You can stay here tonight. Got a small room in the back. Tomorrow I'll take you wherever you want to go." "I have nowhere to go," Willow admitted. "No family, no friends willing to take me in." Samuel studied her for a long moment. "Then you can stay until you figure something out. I've got the space and could use some help around here anyway." Willow's pride warred with her desperation. "I can't accept charity." "It's not charity if you're working," Samuel countered. "I've got a vegetable garden that needs tending, chickens to feed, and truth be told, I'm a terrible cook." A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Consider it a business arrangement." Before Willow could respond, a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen. She gasped, clutching her stomach. Samuel was beside her in an instant. "What is it, the baby?" "I don't know," she panted. "It's too early." "How far along are you?" "About 6 months." Samuel's face showed alarm. "I'll ride for the doctor." "No." Willow grabbed his arm. "It's just I haven't eaten all day. I think the baby's protesting." Relief washed over his features. "Let me fix you something then." "Can't have you both going hungry." As Samuel moved about the small kitchen area, Willow watched him curiously. He seemed at ease with domestic tasks, something rarely seen in the men she knew. "Have you always lived alone?" she asked as he placed a plate of bread, cheese, and dried beef before her. "Since the war, mostly. Had a wife once before I enlisted. Eliza. She couldn't stand the man who came back from the fighting." His voice held no bitterness, just quiet acceptance. "Can't say I blame her much." Willow ate slowly, savoring each bite. "This is good, thank you." Samuel waved away her thanks. "Eat your fill. There's more if you want it." When she finished, Samuel showed her to a small room off the main living area. A narrow bed with a patchwork quilt stood against one wall, a chest of drawers against another. "It's not much," he apologized. "It's perfect," Willow assured him, meaning it. After the day she'd had, this simple room felt like a palace. "Well then," Samuel said awkwardly, "I'll let you get some rest. If you need anything, I'm just across the way." Left alone, Willow sank onto the bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. She placed a protective hand over her swollen belly. "Don't worry, little one," she whispered. "We'll figure this out somehow." For the first time since reading her father's banishment letter, she allowed herself to cry properly, not just a few stray tears, but deep, racking sobs that shook her entire body. Eventually, exhaustion claimed her, and she fell into a dreamless sleep still wearing her damp clothes. She awoke to sunlight streaming through a small window and the aroma of coffee and frying bacon. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then yesterday's events came rushing back: her father's rage, the storm, and the kind stranger who'd taken her in. Willow smoothed her rumpled dress as best she could, and attempted to tame her tangled honey-blonde hair with her fingers before venturing into the main room. Samuel stood at the stove, his back to her. He changed into clean clothes, a blue cotton shirt and worn denims, and his dark hair was still damp from washing. "Morning," he said without turning. "Hope you're hungry." "Starving, actually," Willow admitted, her stomach growling loudly enough to confirm her words. Samuel chuckled, a warm, pleasant sound. "Good, sit down. Food's almost ready." Breakfast was a simple affair of bacon, eggs, and biscuits that were only slightly burned on the bottom. Samuel ate quickly, his movements efficient. "I need to head into town for supplies," he said as he cleared their plates. "You're welcome to come along or stay here and rest. Whatever you prefer." Willow hesitated. The thought of facing the townsfolk's curious stares and whispered judgments made her stomach clench. "I think I'll stay if that's all right. Maybe I could start earning my keep tidy up around here." Samuel looked around the cabin with a rueful smile. "Could probably use it. Never was much for housekeeping." He paused, then added, "Make yourself at home. You and the little one, you're safe here." After he'd gone, Willow set to work. The cabin wasn't filthy, but it clearly needed a woman's touch. She swept the floors, washed the breakfast dishes, and aired out the quilts. The physical labor felt good after months of her family treating her like she might break. Outside, she discovered a clothesline strung between two pine trees. She washed her spare dress and hung it to dry in the spring sunshine, breathing deeply of the pine-scented air. In the distance, the mountains stood sentinel, their peaks still capped with snow despite the April thaw. By midday, she'd made an inventory of the pantry, woefully understocked, fed the chickens, who seemed pleased to see her, and located a small vegetable patch that had gone to seed last season. She was kneeling in the dirt, pulling weeds when Samuel returned. "You don't waste time, do you?" he remarked, taking in her dirt-smudged hands and flushed cheeks. Willow straightened, one hand supporting her aching back. "I told you I'd earn my keep." Samuel unloaded several packages from his saddlebags. "Got some things in town. Figured you might need them." To Willow's surprise, he produced a bundle of fabric, a bar of lavender soap, and a small jar of salve. "Midwife in town recommended this for," he gestured vaguely toward her stomach. "Said it helps with the stretching." Touched by his thoughtfulness, Willow accepted the gifts. "Thank you." "You didn't have to, like I said. You're welcome here," Samuel interrupted, clearly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Oh, and I ran into the Reverend. Told him I had a cousin staying with me for a while. Figured that might head off any talk." Willow stared at him. "You're willing to lie to protect my reputation," Samuel shrugged. "Not exactly a lie. We're all God's children, aren't we? Makes us cousins of a sort." Despite everything, Willow found herself smiling. "I suppose it does." Over the next few weeks, they settled into a routine. Samuel worked the ranch, tending to his small herd of cattle, repairing fences, and breaking the occasional wild horse to sell in town. Willow kept house, tended the garden, and learned to cook on the temperamental wood stove. They existed in a careful dance, each respecting the other's space and privacy. Samuel never asked about the baby's father, and Willow never pressed for details about his past. In the evenings, they often sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. "My mother would have loved this view," Willow said one evening, 7 months into her pregnancy. Her belly had grown considerably, and the baby seemed to have a fondness for kicking her ribs whenever she sat still. She's not. Samuel left the question hanging. No, she's alive. Just. Willow sighed. She wouldn't stand against my father, never has, Samuel nodded thoughtfully. Some women weren't raised to have their own voice. What about your mother? You mentioned her that first night. A soft smile crossed Samuel's features. Ma was something else. Ran our farm in Pennsylvania after Pa died, raised 4 boys on her own. Toughest person I ever knew, but gentle too. Could quote scripture while wrestling a pig into a pen. Willow laughed at the image. She sounds wonderful. She was, Samuel agreed. Consumption took her while I was at war. My youngest brother wrote to tell me, but the letter didn't reach me until months later. He stared out at the darkening landscape. That's the thing about war. It takes more than just the men who die on the battlefield. It takes pieces of everyone. Willow reached over impulsively and squeezed his hand. Samuel looked startled but didn't pull away. For a moment they sat connected, the air between them charged with something neither was ready to name. Finally, Samuel cleared his throat and stood. Getting chilly. We should head in. That night, Willow lay awake, her hand resting on her restless baby. She thought about Samuel Cooper, his kindness, his strength, the sadness that sometimes shadowed his eyes. In just a few weeks, he'd become more than a benefactor. He'd become a friend. Perhaps the only true friend she had in the world. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Willow was hanging laundry when the sound of an approaching wagon caught her attention. A woman in a sensible dress and bonnet pulled up, surveying the homestead with obvious curiosity. "Hello there." The woman called. "You must be Samuel Cooper's cousin. I'm Margaret Holloway, the Reverend's wife." Willow's heart raced as she smoothed her dress over her prominent belly. "Yes, I'm Willow Chadwick. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Holloway." The woman climbed down from the wagon with surprising agility for someone of her age. "Please call me Margaret. I've brought some preserves and a pie. Thought you might appreciate something sweet." Willow accepted the offerings with genuine gratitude. "That's very kind of you." "Nonsense." Margaret waved away her thanks. "It's what neighbors do. Besides, I was curious to meet the young woman who's got Samuel Cooper keeping regular hours and showing up at church 3 Sundays in a row." Heat crept up Willow's cheeks. "I'm afraid you're mistaken. Mr. Cooper and I are just family." "Yes," he mentioned. Margaret interrupted with a knowing smile. "May I come in? The spring sun is deceptively warm." Inside, Willow served tea while Margaret chattered about town gossip. Finally, the older woman set down her cup and fixed Willow with a direct gaze. "Now, dear, perhaps you'd like to tell me the truth about your situation. I promise it won't go beyond these walls." Willow froze, her cup halfway to her lips. "I don't know what you mean." Margaret's expression softened. "I've delivered nearly every baby in this county for 30 years, child. I recognize a woman in your condition, and I know Samuel Cooper has no cousins. He told my husband as much when he first arrived in these parts." Tears welled in Willow's eyes. "Are you going to tell everyone?" "Heavens, no." Margaret reached across to pat Willow's hand. "Your business is your own, but if you need help when your time comes, I want you to know you can send for me." Relief washed over Willow. "Thank you." "Now then," Margaret continued briskly, "how far along are you?" "Just over 7 months. "First child?" Willow nodded. "The father?" "Not in the picture," Willow said stiffly. Margaret nodded sagely. "And Samuel took you in out of the goodness of his heart, did he?" "He did," Willow defended. "He's been nothing but respectful and kind." "I don't doubt it," Margaret mused. "Samuel Cooper is one of the few genuinely good men I've encountered, been through his share of troubles that one." Willow hesitated, then asked, "Do you know much about him? His past?" Margaret studied her for a moment. "He doesn't talk about himself much, does he?" "Well, I know he came here about 8 years ago, bought this place when it was little more than a tumble-down shack. Worked hard, keeps to himself mostly. There was a time when he hit the bottle pretty hard, but that was years back. She paused. He fought in the war, came back changed like so many did. Lost his wife because of it, though some say that marriage was troubled from the start. He mentioned that, Willow said quietly. Margaret's eyes twinkled. Did he now? That's interesting. Before Willow could respond, the door opened and Samuel himself walked in. He stopped short at the sight of their visitor. "Mrs. Holloway," he said, removing his hat. "This is a surprise." "Just bringing a proper welcome for your cousin," Margaret replied, emphasizing the last word slightly. "She's a delightful young woman." Samuel's eyes flicked to Willow, who gave a small nod to indicate everything was all right. His shoulders relaxed visibly. "Will you stay for dinner, Mrs. Holloway?" he offered. "Oh no, I should be getting back. The Reverend gets terribly lost without me around." She rose, gathering her shawl. "But I hope to see you both at church on Sunday." After seeing Margaret off, Samuel turned to Willow with concern. "She didn't give you any trouble, did she?" Willow shook her head. "No, quite the opposite. She knew I wasn't your cousin, but she offered to help when the baby comes." Samuel looked relieved. "Margaret's good people. Best midwife in the territory from what I hear." "She told me a little about you," Willow ventured. Samuel's expression closed slightly. "Did she now?" "Nothing bad," Willow assured him. "Just that you've been here 8 years and you've worked hard to build this place up." Samuel nodded, relaxing again. "Started with almost nothing. Some days I'm amazed I've made it this far." "You should be proud," Willow said sincerely. "You've created something beautiful here." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a current of understanding and mutual respect. For a moment, Willow could almost imagine that this was real, that they were truly a family waiting for their child, not strangers thrown together by circumstance. The baby chose that moment to deliver a particularly enthusiastic kick. Willow gasped, hand flying to her side. "What is it?" Samuel asked, alarmed. "Nothing," Willow laughed. "Just this little one reminding me of its presence. Would you like to feel?" Samuel looked uncertain but nodded. Willow took his large, calloused hand and placed it on the side of her belly where the baby was most active. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, as if on cue, the baby kicked right against Samuel's palm, his face transformed with wonder. "That's something else," he whispered. "Yes," Willow agreed softly. "It is." Samuel's hand lingered a moment longer before he withdrew it, clearing his throat. "I should clean up before dinner." That evening marked a shift in their relationship. The careful distance they'd maintained began to dissolve. Samuel started asking about the baby. Did Willow have a name picked out? Did she think it was a boy or girl? Was there anything special she needed to prepare? "I've been thinking," he said one night in late May as they sat by the fire. "The cabin's small, but I could add on another room." "For the baby?" Willow looked up from her mending, surprised. "You do that? Why not?" Samuel replied, seemingly absorbed in whittling a small piece of wood. "Place could use expanding anyway." "Samuel," Willow set down her sewing. "I appreciate everything you've done more than I can say, but we can't keep pretending. Once the baby comes, I'll need to find my own way." Samuel's hands stilled. "Why?" "Because this isn't your responsibility. The baby and I were not your family." Samuel met her gaze steadily. "You could be." The words hung in the air between them, laden with meaning. Willow's heart hammered in her chest. "What are you saying?" Samuel set down his carving and moved to kneel before her chair. "I'm saying I care for you, Willow, more than I expected to, more than I thought I could care for anyone again." "Samuel, let me finish," he said gently. "I know it's fast. I know you're still hurting from what that railroad man did to you. But I'm offering you and your child a home A real home, not just charity. Tears sprang to Willow's eyes. You mean marriage? Yes. His voice was firm, his gaze unwavering. It wouldn't have to be, he hesitated. We could keep things as they are between us if that's what you want. I'd never pressure you, but the baby would have my name and you'd both have security. Willow's mind reeled. Why would you do this? Because you deserve better than what life's handed you so far, Samuel answered simply. And because I've grown mighty fond of you, Willow Chadwick. Her heart swelled at his words, but doubt lingered. What if you come to resent us? This isn't your child. It would be, Samuel countered. In every way that matters. Willow searched his face, finding only sincerity in his blue eyes. I need time to think about this. Samuel nodded, rising to his feet. Take all the time you need. The offer stands. He picked up his hat. Think I'll check on the horses before turning in. Alone, Willow pressed her hands to her flushed cheeks. Marriage to Samuel Cooper. The very idea sent a thrill through her that she couldn't entirely attribute to practicality. Over these past weeks, she'd grown to admire him deeply, his quiet strength, his kindness, his unwavering integrity. But was admiration enough to build a marriage on? And yet, what were her alternatives? To raise a child alone in a world that condemned unwed mothers. To struggle for every penny while facing constant judgment. The baby kicked as if offering an opinion on the matter, and Willow smiled despite her confusion. What do you think, little one? Is Samuel Cooper the kind of father you'd want? She already knew the answer. Yes, he was. Any child would be blessed to have such a man for a father. The question was whether she could be the wife he deserved. Sleep eluded her that night as she weighed her decision. By morning, her mind was made up. She found Samuel in the barn, brushing down his favorite mare. I've been thinking about your proposal, she said without preamble. Samuel set down the brush, giving her his full attention. And I'll marry you, Willow said, her voice steadier than she felt. But I have conditions. One corner of Samuel's mouth quirked up. I'm listening. First, this has to be a real marriage, not just an arrangement. I won't live a lie. Samuel's expression grew serious. I wouldn't want that either. Second, if you ever change your mind or regret this decision, you tell me honestly. No suffering in silence out of obligation. Agreed, Samuel nodded. Anything else? Willow took a deep breath. Yes. I need to know that you understand what you're taking on. This baby will come into the world in about 8 weeks. There will be midnight feedings and crying and all the challenges that come with an infant. Samuel stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. Willow, I've thought this through. I want you and your child in my life, not out of duty or obligation, but because the thought of you leaving makes this place feel empty already. His words melted the last of her resistance. Then yes, Samuel Cooper, I will marry you. A smile broke across his face, transforming his usually reserved features. Slowly, as if giving her time to pull away, he leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her lips. It was brief and tender, a promise rather than a demand. When? He asked as he drew back. Soon, Willow decided. Before the baby comes. They were married the following Sunday in the small white church in town. Margaret Holloway had taken charge of the arrangements, insisting that every bride deserved flowers and cake, no matter the circumstances. She'd also helped Willow alter one of her dresses to accommodate her growing belly. The ceremony was simple, but meaningful. Willow wore wildflowers in her hair and carried a small bouquet of spring blossoms. Samuel looked handsome in his best shirt and clean denims, his dark hair slicked back with water. Reverend Holloway officiated, his kind eyes twinkling as the couple exchanged their vows. I now pronounce you man and wife, he declared with genuine warmth. You may kiss your bride. Samuel's kiss was gentle, but held a hint of something deeper, a promise of things to come. Willow felt herself blushing as a smattering of applause broke out from the handful of guests, mostly neighbors and townspeople, who'd come to know Samuel over the years. "Mrs. Cooper," Samuel whispered against her ear as they turned to face the congregation. The name sent a pleasant shiver through her. Mrs. Cooper. Willow Cooper. A new identity to match her new beginning. The small reception that followed was held in the church hall. Willow found herself welcomed by most of the townspeople, though she noticed a few disapproving glances at her condition. Margaret had spread the story that Willow was a young widow whose husband had died in a mining accident, but not everyone seemed convinced. "Pay them no mind," Margaret advised, noticing Willow's discomfort. "People will talk no matter what. In a month they'll find something else to gossip about." True to Margaret's prediction, the whispers died down as spring gave way to early summer. Willow settled into her role as Samuel's wife with surprising ease. Their relationship, built on mutual respect and growing affection, blossomed in the privacy of their home. Samuel proved to be a considerate husband, mindful of her condition and never pushing for more intimacy than she was comfortable with. Their kisses grew longer, their touches more familiar, but he seemed content to let things progress naturally. June brought scorching heat that made Willow's last weeks of pregnancy particularly uncomfortable. Her ankles swelled, her back ached constantly, and sleep became an elusive luxury. "Maybe we should move your bed out here where it's cooler," Samuel suggested one sweltering evening as Willow fanned herself ineffectively. "Our bed," she corrected gently. They had been sharing the larger bedroom since their marriage, though Samuel still slept on a pallet on the floor beside the bed, insisting Willow needed the space in her condition. Samuel's ears reddened slightly. "Our bed," he amended with a small smile. That night, unable to find a comfortable position, Willow gave up on sleep entirely. She waddled out onto the porch, seeking relief in the marginally cooler night air. Samuel found her there an hour later, staring up at the stars. "Can't sleep?" he asked, settling beside her on the bench he'd built. "Your child is apparently practicing for a career as an acrobat," Willow replied, placing his hand on a spot where the baby was particularly active. Samuel grinned as he felt the movement. "Strong like its mother," Willow snorted. "I don't feel very strong at the moment. I feel enormous and uncomfortable," and she broke off as a strange sensation washed over her. "Oh, what is it?" Samuel's voice sharpened with concern. I think that was a contraction." Samuel's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "It's early still, isn't it?" "Only by a week or so," Willow said, trying to remain calm. "First babies are often early or late." Another wave of pain gripped her, stronger this time. She gasped, clutching Samuel's hand. "I'm riding for Margaret," he decided, already on his feet. "Not yet," Willow managed as the pain subsided. "They could be false pains. Let's wait and see if they continue." But the contractions did continue, growing steadily stronger and closer together. By dawn, there was no denying that the baby was coming. Samuel rode for Margaret while Willow paced the cabin, pausing to brace herself against the table or wall when each contraction hit. Margaret arrived with remarkable speed, bringing with her a young woman she introduced as her assistant. "Well now," she said briskly after examining Willow. "This little one's certainly eager to meet the world." The next hours passed in a haze of pain for Willow. Samuel had been banished to the porch, though she could hear him pacing outside. Margaret proved to be a calm, reassuring presence, guiding Willow through each contraction with steady instructions. "You're doing wonderfully," she encouraged as the labor intensified. "Not long now." The sun was high in the sky when Willow finally felt the overwhelming urge to push. Margaret positioned herself at the foot of the bed, her expression focused. "That's it, push now," she commanded. "Good girl. Again with the next pain, Willow bore down with all her strength, crying out as she felt the baby's head crown. "I can't," she gasped. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can," Margaret said firmly. "One more good push and you'll meet your baby." Gathering the last of her strength, Willow pushed with everything she had. There was a moment of searing pressure, then blessed relief as the baby slid into Margaret's waiting hands. A lusty cry filled the room. "A boy," Margaret announced triumphantly. "A beautiful, healthy boy." Tears streamed down Willow's face as Margaret placed the squirming, red-faced infant on her chest. "Hello, little one," she whispered, drinking in every detail of his perfect face. "I'm your mama." After cleaning up both mother and child, Margaret opened the door to admit Samuel, who entered looking both terrified and elated. "You have a son," Margaret told him with a smile. "A fine, strong boy." Samuel approached the bed cautiously, his eyes fixed on the small bundle in Willow's arms. "He's so tiny," he breathed. "Would you like to hold him?" Willow asked. Samuel hesitated, then nodded. Carefully, as if handling the most precious cargo in the world, he took the baby from Willow's arms. The infant fussed briefly, then settled against Samuel's broad chest. "Hello there, son," Samuel whispered, one finger gently tracing the baby's cheek. The love in his voice was unmistakable, and Willow felt her heart expand with a rush of affection for this man who had opened his home and heart to her and her child. "What will you call him?" Margaret asked as she packed up her supplies. Willow and Samuel exchanged a look. They had discussed names but hadn't settled on one. "William," Samuel said after a moment. "William Thomas Cooper." Willow smiled, recognizing the tribute to her own name in his choice. "William," she agreed. "It's perfect." After Margaret left, promising to return the next day to check on them, Samuel settled on the edge of the bed, still cradling the sleeping infant. "He's perfect," he murmured. "He is," Willow agreed, exhausted but happier than she'd ever been. "Thank you," Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion. "For what? For this? For him? For making me a father?" He looked up, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I never thought I'd have a family again." Willow reached out to touch his arm. "Thank you for giving us a home. For accepting us both." Samuel carefully transferred the baby back to Willow's arms, then leaned down to place a tender kiss on her forehead. "You are home," he said simply. "Both of you, always." The next few weeks passed in a blur of midnight feedings, diaper changes, and precious moments of discovery. William, or Will, as they began calling him, proved to be a good-natured baby, with a healthy appetite and a strong set of lungs when he wanted attention. Samuel took to fatherhood with natural ease, seemingly undaunted by the messier aspects of infant care. He would walk the floor with Will when he was fussy, sing him off key lullabies, and proudly show him off to anyone who visited the ranch. "He has your eyes," Willow observed one evening as they sat together on the porch while sleeping peacefully in Samuel's arms. Samuel looked startled. "You think so?" "Yes, the same blue." She touched Will's tiny hand. "It's as if he was meant to be yours all along." Samuel's expression softened. "He is mine, in every way that matters." He hesitated, then added, "And you, Willow, are you happy here?" "With me?" The question caught her off guard. "Of course I am. You've given us everything." "That's not what I asked," Samuel said quietly. "I want to know if you're happy being my wife, not just grateful for the security." Willow considered the question seriously. These past months had transformed her feelings for Samuel from gratitude to deep affection and respect. The tenderness he showed her and Will, the way he looked at her when he thought she wouldn't notice, it stirred something in her that she'd never felt before, not even for Will's biological father. "I am happy," she said finally, meeting his gaze. "Happier than I ever expected to be again after everything that happened. You're a good man, Samuel Cooper." Relief flooded his features. "I want to be a good husband to you," he admitted, "not just a provider." Willow understood what he wasn't saying. Since Will's birth, their physical relationship had remained chaste, with Samuel still sleeping on his pallet beside the bed. "Perhaps it's time you stopped sleeping on the floor," she suggested softly. Samuel's eyes darkened with unmistakable desire, but he remained cautious. "Are you sure?" "There's no rush, Willow." In answer, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his in a kiss that left no doubt about her intentions. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. "Tonight," she whispered against his mouth. Samuel nodded, his voice husky as he replied, "Tonight." That evening marked the true beginning of their marriage in every sense. Samuel proved to be as considerate and gentle a lover as he was a husband, and Willow discovered desires within herself she hadn't known existed. They came together with a passion that surprised them both, finding in each other a partner who could heal old wounds and create new joy. As summer gave way to autumn, the Cooper family settled into a rhythm of domestic contentment. Will thrived, growing stronger and more alert each day. He had his mother's honey blonde curls and his father's, or rather, Samuel's striking blue eyes. Samuel continued expanding the cabin, adding not only a nursery for Will, but also a larger kitchen for Willow. She, in turn, transformed the homestead with feminine touches: curtains at the windows, quilts on the beds, flowers in jars on the table when they were in season. One crisp October morning, as golden leaves drifted from the aspens, a wagon approached the ranch. Willow was hanging laundry while Will napped in a basket nearby. She shaded her eyes against the sun, trying to identify the visitor. As the wagon drew closer, her blood ran cold. She recognized the man driving it, tall and handsome, with the same charming smile that had once made her heart race. Joshua Barton, the railroad surveyor who had promised to return for her. Will's biological father. Willow's first instinct was to grab Will and run into the house, but she steeled herself. She was no longer the naive girl who had fallen for pretty words and empty promises. She was Willow Cooper now, a wife and mother with a good man who loved her. "Hello, Willow," Joshua called as he pulled the wagon to a stop. "You're a sight for sore eyes." She acknowledged him with a curt nod. "Joshua, what brings you here?" He climbed down from the wagon, his eyes dropping to the basket where Will slept. "I went back to Whispering Pines looking for you. Your family told me what happened, that they'd turned you out." He had the grace to look ashamed. "I've been searching for you for months." "Why?" Willow asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Because I made you a promise," Joshua replied, moving closer. "I said I'd come back for you, and I meant it. I got held up in Montana territory. There was a landslide, men were killed. By the time I made it back, you were gone." Willow stood her ground. "It's too late, Joshua. I've made a new life. With the rancher. That's what the Reverend's wife told me." His expression hardened. "Is that my child, Willow?" Before she could answer, the sound of hoofbeats announced Samuel's return from checking the herd. He dismounted quickly, his expression wary as he assessed the situation. "Everything all right here?" he asked, coming to stand beside Willow. "Samuel, this is Joshua Barton," Willow said, her voice miraculously calm. "Joshua, this is my husband, Samuel Cooper." The two men sized each other up. Joshua was taller, younger by perhaps 5 years, with the smooth hands and fine clothes of a man who worked with his mind rather than his body. Samuel, sun-weathered and solid, radiated a quiet strength that made him seem the larger presence despite his physical disadvantage. "Your husband," Joshua repeated, a bitter twist to his mouth. That didn't take long. Samuel's jaw tightened, but his voice remained level. "You've got no call to speak to my wife that way. And you've got no right to raise my son," Joshua shot back. "He's not your son," Samuel stated flatly. You gave up that right when you abandoned Willow. Joshua's face flushed with anger. I didn't abandon her. I told you there was an accident and not a single letter in all that time, Willow interrupted. Not one word to let me know you were still alive. I waited for you, Joshua. I defended you to my family until they threw me out on the street. Joshua had the decency to look chagrined. I'm sorry, Willow. Truly I am. But I'm here now and I want to make things right. I want to provide for my child. Will already has a father, Willow said firmly, moving to stand closer to Samuel. A real father who's been there from the start. Samuel's arm slid around her waist, supportive but not possessive. What exactly are you hoping to accomplish here, Barton? Joshua's gaze shifted between them. I have rights, that's my blood. You have no rights here, Samuel countered. Not legal, not moral. That boy has my name and my protection. For a tense moment it seemed Joshua might argue further, then his shoulders slumped slightly. I just want to see him. Once. Can you grant me that much at least? Willow looked up at Samuel, who gave her a barely perceptible nod. It was her decision to make. You can see him, she said finally. But that's all. Joshua approached the basket cautiously. Will had awakened and was contentedly playing with his feet, gurgling happily. At the sight of the stranger he paused, his blue eyes curious. He's beautiful, Joshua murmured. Has your hair. And his father's eyes, Willow replied pointedly. Joshua glanced at Samuel, then back to the baby. He reached out as if to touch Will, then thought better of it. What's his name? William Thomas Cooper, Samuel answered. Joshua nodded, a flash of pain crossing his features. A good name. He straightened and addressed Willow directly. I am sorry, Willow, for everything. I meant to keep my promise, but it doesn't matter now. Willow cut him off gently but firmly. What's done is done. We've all moved forward. If you ever need anything for him, Joshua persisted, I have money now. A good position with the railroad. We don't need your money, Samuel said. But thank you for the offer. Joshua looked as if he wanted to say more, but instead gave a curt nod. I'll be staying in town for a few days if you change your mind. After that, I'm headed to California. He climbed back into his wagon, tipped his hat to Willow, and drove away without looking back. Willow watched him go, a strange mixture of emotions swirling within her. Closure, perhaps. The final severing of a connection that had once seemed so important but now felt like a distant dream. You all right? Samuel asked quietly when the wagon had disappeared from view. Willow turned to him, taking in the concern in his eyes, the way he held himself ready to comfort or defend her as needed. This was the man who had taken her in when she had nothing, who had given her child a name, who loved them both with a steadfast devotion that made her heart ache with gratitude. I'm more than all right, she assured him, reaching up to touch his weathered cheek. I'm exactly where I belong. Samuel's expression softened as he pulled her close. I thought for a moment you might. Might what? Go with him? Willow shook her head emphatically. Never. What you've given us, it's real, Samuel. It's home. Samuel's kiss was tender yet possessive, a silent affirmation of their bond. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Willow Cooper. Have from almost the first moment you stumbled into my life. Tears pricked at Willow's eyes. It was the first time either of them had spoken those words aloud, though they'd shown it in countless ways over the months. I love you too, she whispered. So much. Will began to fuss, breaking the moment. Samuel chuckled as he scooped the baby into his arms. Someone's feeling left out. Willow laughed, wiping away her tears. Or hungry. It's nearly time for his feeding. Together, they walked back to their house with Will babbling happily between them. Joshua Barton left town 3 days later without attempting to contact them again. Life at the Cooper Ranch continued its peaceful course. Samuel's cattle business prospered, allowing them to make improvements to the property. Willow started a small business of her own, selling preserves and baked goods in town. Will's first birthday arrived with the summer, celebrated with a small gathering of neighbors and friends. As Willow watched Samuel teaching their son to blow out his single candle, she reflected on the incredible journey of the past year and a half. From despair to joy, from abandonment to belonging. That night, after Will was tucked into his crib, Samuel presented Willow with a small package wrapped in brown paper. "What's this?" she asked, surprised. "Open it and see," he encouraged. Inside was a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. When she opened it, she found a tiny portrait of the three of them that had been taken in town several months prior. "Samuel, it's beautiful," she breathed. "Turn it over," he instructed. Engraved on the back were the words that had changed her life. "You are home." Tears filled Willow's eyes as Samuel fastened the chain around her neck. "I don't know what I did to deserve you," she whispered. Samuel tilted her chin up gently. "You survived," he said simply. "You had the courage to keep going when others would have broken. That's all anyone can do in this life, face what comes and keep moving forward." "Together," Willow added, linking her fingers with his. "Together," Samuel agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss. The years that followed brought both joys and challenges. Will grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his mother's quick mind and his father's quiet determination. When he was 3, Willow gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Margaret, after both their mothers. 2 years later, twins Jonathan and James joined the family, completing their brood and filling the expanded cabin with noise and laughter. Samuel's ranch flourished into one of the most prosperous in the county. He became known not only for his fine cattle, but also for his fair dealings with both settlers and the native Ute people, who still inhabited parts of the territory. Willow's preserve business expanded to include a small shop in town where she sold not only her own goods, but also handcrafts made by other women in the area. It became a gathering place where friendships were formed and community bonds strengthened. Will's paternity remained their private business, as far as the community was concerned, and in every way that truly mattered. He was Samuel Cooper's firstborn son. If Samuel sometimes noticed his eldest's quick mind for numbers or natural talent for drawing traits more reminiscent of a surveyor than a rancher, he never mentioned it. Will was his son in heart and soul, and that was all that counted. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Samuel surprised Willow by taking her to San Francisco, a journey made possible by the Transcontinental Railroad that Joshua Barton had once helped survey. The irony wasn't lost on either of them, but it was a distant thought, a footnote in a story that had long since taken its own direction. They returned home to their children and their ranch, to the life they had built together from the ashes of their separate pasts. It wasn't always easy. Drought years tested their resources. Illness occasionally swept through the family, and the normal tensions of marriage and parenthood provided their own challenges, but it was rich and full and deeply satisfying. One evening, nearly 15 years after that rainy night when Willow had stumbled into Samuel's life, they sat together on the porch of their home. Will, now a tall young man of 14, was teaching his siblings a game in the yard, his laughter carrying on the breeze. "Do you ever wonder about him?" Samuel asked quietly. "Barton, I mean." Willow considered the question honestly. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Not often. Usually only when Will does something particularly clever with numbers or maps." She took Samuel's hand. "But then, I remember who taught him to ride a horse, who stayed up all night when he had scarlet fever, who shows him every day what a good man looks like. And I know who his real father is." Samuel squeezed her hand, his eyes suspiciously bright in the fading light. "I've never regretted it, you know, taking you in that night. Best decision I ever made. Better than that bay stallion you bought last spring," Willow teased, referring to Samuel's pride and joy. He laughed, the sound still able to warm her heart after all these years. "Even better than that." His expression grew serious. "I promised you a home, Willow. I hope I've kept that promise." Willow leaned her head against his shoulder, watching their children play as the setting sun painted the mountains in fiery gold. "Every single day," she murmured. "Every single day." As dusk settled over the Cooper Ranch, the family gathered for dinner in the warm kitchen that had witnessed so many meals, so many conversations, so many moments both ordinary and profound. Will, now taking on more responsibility around the ranch, discussed the new calves with his father. 10-year-old Sarah recounted her day at school, while the 7-year-old twins competed to tell the most outlandish story about the frog they'd found by the creek. Willow looked around the table at these people she loved beyond measure: her husband, her children, the family they had created together. From the darkest moment of her life had come this abundance of joy. She touched the silver locket that still hung around her neck, feeling its familiar weight against her skin. Home. She was home.